April 25, 1945. The thunder of artillery still echoed across the war-torn landscape of Germany. Along the banks of the Elbe River, the world was about to witness one of the most symbolic moments of World War II. After nearly 6 years of relentless bloodshed, the Allied forces were closing in from both east and west. The Soviet Red Army, pushing in from Berlin's outskirts, was about to meet the advancing Americans. And in that meeting, the fate of Nazi Germany would finally be sealed. That morning, near the town of Torgau, elements of the U.S. 69th Infantry Division were cautiously advancing through shattered buildings and burned-out villages. Every corner held the possibility of hidden German resistance or desperate ambush. Lieutenant Albert Kotzebue, leading a small reconnaissance patrol, crossed through a forest path littered with wrecked vehicles and exhausted civilians. The men were tired, wary, and unsure whether the Germans in the area had surrendered or were preparing to fight to the last man. To the east, Soviet Lieutenant Alexander Silvashko's unit of the 58th Guards Rifle Division was also pressing forward, sweeping through the remnants of the German defensive line. For days, Soviet soldiers had been hearing the distant rumble of American artillery and the hum of aircraft. They knew they were close. But in the chaos of collapsing fronts, communication was difficult, and no one could say exactly where the Americans were. As Kotzebue's patrol reached the Elbe River, they found the remnants of a destroyed bridge. The steel girders jutted up like bones from the water, twisted and mangled by explosives. Across the river, faint figures moved among the ruins, at first indistinct and shadowy. The Americans raised binoculars. The shapes were not German soldiers. Red flags could be seen fluttering on the far side. The realization hit instantly. They were Soviets. Cautiously, Kotzebue signaled across the river, shouting greetings in broken Russian. The voices that came back were filled with excitement. For the first time, the Allied armies had made visual contact. Kotzebue's men waved a white bedsheet tied to a rifle. On the opposite shore, the Soviets answered with cheers and flag-waving, but there was no way to cross. The bridge was gone, and the current was too strong to swim. Later that day, another American officer, Lieutenant William Robertson, arrived with a larger detachment. Determined to make contact, Robertson and 3 soldiers found a small rowboat and pushed into the river. Under the watchful eyes of both armies, they paddled across the swirling current and climbed up the far bank, drenched but smiling. There, they were greeted by Lieutenant Silvashko and his Soviet comrades. The men shook hands, embraced, and posed for photographs. A simple gesture that carried the weight of history. East had met West. The meeting at Torgau was more than symbolic. It marked the effective splitting of Nazi Germany into two. From that moment, there was no escape for the remaining German forces. Hitler's empire had been cut in half, and deep inside his Berlin bunker, the news hit like a thunderbolt. Reports of the Elbe link-up reached the Führer late that night. Witnesses said he sat in silence for several minutes, then erupted in fury. The dream of a 1,000-year Reich had ended. In the days that followed, the German front collapsed completely. The remnants of the Wehrmacht surrendered piecemeal, their units reduced to fragments. Entire divisions laid down their arms. Civilians streamed westward by the thousands, desperate to avoid capture by the Soviets. For them, surrendering to the Americans seemed the only hope of survival. Inside Berlin, the situation turned catastrophic. Soviet artillery pounded the city day and night, reducing it to rubble. Hitler issued delusional orders, demanding counterattacks by divisions that no longer existed. His generals knew the war was lost, but none dared defy him openly. In his paranoia, Hitler accused his officers of betrayal and cowardice. Even his most loyal followers could see the end coming. By April 30th, Soviet troops were only a few hundred meters from the Reich Chancellery. The Red Army's banner flew over the Reichstag. That same day, in the gloom of his underground bunker, Adolf Hitler ended his life. His death was followed by the suicides of several close associates. Within hours, Berlin's defenders began to surrender en masse. On May the 2nd, Berlin fell completely. Across Europe, German forces surrendered city after city. Finally, on May 8, 1945, the war in Europe was officially over. WWII Day. In London, Paris, Moscow, and New York, crowds filled the streets, celebrating the end of a nightmare that had claimed tens of millions of lives. Back at Torgau, the spot where the two armies met became a symbol of unity and sacrifice. The soldiers who shook hands that day came from different worlds, one speaking English, the other Russian. But for a brief moment, they stood together as allies. Their meeting was photographed, filmed, and broadcast around the world. Those images, showing smiling soldiers embracing on the ruins of a shattered bridge, came to represent hope. Proof that cooperation between nations could overcome even the darkest chapters of human history. For the soldiers themselves, the reality was more personal. They had survived the unthinkable, years of endless combat, hunger, and loss. Many had left comrades behind on the battlefields of Europe. The meeting on the Elbe was, in many ways, their victory too, not of nations or ideologies, but of endurance and shared humanity. Even decades later, the handshake at Torgau remains one of the most powerful moments of World War II. It was not the capture of a city or the destruction of an army, but the meeting of men who, through courage and perseverance, had fought their way across a world in flames to find each other at the heart of a collapsing empire.